Kevin is talking today on tomatoes and peppers, and we're going to sow some.
Well, we'll sow the tomatoes.
Yeah.
Probably leave the peppers off just for a little bit longer. You know, the same family, same Solanaceae family as potatoes and tomatoes. And the reason we sow all of these things early is because our season runs out. You know, if we don't get them in now, they don't have time to actually grow and mature, and for us to ripen the fruit in the summer, if we have the summer. The tomatoes and the peppers, they're kind of Mesoamerica, South America. They started Ecuador, Mexico, places, or Ecuador and down into South America. And then what happened was some of the seeds were taken up into Mexico. And so the tomatoes that we had come over here were from Mexico. So what you have there is you have two genetic bottlenecks. So out of all of the hundreds and thousands of landrace varieties of tomatoes that were growing in South America, only a few of them were taken to Mexico. And then out of all of the ones in Mexico that ended up in Europe, there's another bottleneck because we didn't take all of those. We only took the ones that we kind of wanted. So there's a bit of a genetic bottleneck in European tomatoes. It doesn't mean that there isn't any diversity there. It just means it's not a spot on the diversity that's in Central and South America. And the same with peppers, really. I mean, I trained in California, so you know we could grow peppers outside there, and it was really productive. I'm on about peppers, not chilies at this stage. And you know, we grew the kind of Californian wonder, the block size peppers that you buy in the supermarkets that probably come from Almeria in southern Spain, in the glass houses there. And so when I started growing them here, they didn't work very well. They were a nightmare to try and get anything off of them. So then I started to look into it and realized, you know, there's a whole series of varieties been grown in Eastern Europe for years and years, and they're more the kind of bull's horn type. You know, they're not the blocky type, the bull's horn. So that's basically what we started to concentrate then down on the farm, was working on the sweet peppers that would grow here from the nearest kind of environment that was like us, and then to try and save the seed to kind of build in some kind of epigenic ability for growing here. And also constantly looking for something new to grow. The tomatoes, they're self-pollinating mainly now. They mainly, you know, they have this the stigma on the inside is covered in an anther-cone, and so it doesn't, when it's wind pollinated mainly, or what we do in the tunnels would be tap wires attached to the tomato vines, which shakes them. And what happens then is the pollen falls off of the stigma onto the anthers there, and that's how you get a better pollination of them. But in the wild, they were insect pollinated. And we've kind of lost most of that ability of insect pollinated plants, where we've taken over the whole process of how the plants, you know, we've directed the plants evolution in the direction that we want. A bit like garlic. You know, it's hard to get hold of true garlic seed because we've clonally reproduced them from cloves rather than reproducing them from seed all the time. So what they've started doing now, what we saw start to turn up just lately, is people diving deeper into the gene pool that's already there in I'll just put these on because I'm glaring. That's in South America, and so the latest ones that have been coming out, they're tasting of berries, not so much more like tomato, but more like a berry flavor to them, kind of plummy raspberry kind of flavor. So last year we grew Brad's Atomic Grape, which it's the strangest looking tomato you've ever seen. It's kind of black and blue, but that's not the end of the story. It's kind of shot through with kind of golden streaks and red streaks and orange streaks on it. And when you look into the you know, one of the reasons we eat is to gather nutrients inside ourselves. So there's a lot of interest in dark blues and black colors now because of anthocyanins, and these are responses that plants have adapted themselves to high sunlight levels. So they've made themselves go this color. And the same with lettuces as well, dark red lettuces. But when we eat those, we assimilate those nutrients as well. It's not to say that lycopene, which is the nutrient in the red tomatoes, isn't any good, but lycopene really needs to be cooked to get the best out of it, rather than just eaten raw. They're a fantastic crop to process. They're the easiest one to process. You can leave them whole or just slice them in half, put them on a tray in the freezer, they'll freeze, scoop them off, put them in a bag, and it's as easy as that. Then when you want to use them, just put them into whatever it is you're cooking, and they'll defrost as you're cooking it. There is a bit of a thing about that we eat too many solanaceae, and that they are the deadly nightshade family. And so some people do have problems with like potatoes and aubergines and peppers and tomatoes, and you'll get it kind of like as a stomach ache. It can be a lot of the time. So just, you know, to beware of all of these things. So what we do with I'll just talk about it a bit, and then we'll do some sowing of them just to show you how to sow them. So what we do is we normally start them off in cells like this. And so if we do some sowing today, I'll be taking this home and putting it on the windowsill and getting them to germinate. That's the hardest bit, is to get things to germinate this time of the year. If you can give them the right warmth, they'll germinate, and once they've germinated, they're normally a bit hardier than they would be, you know, once they've germinated, rather than trying to get them to germinate in the cold. So they're I don't know if you know, there's basically two types of plants that we grow, and they're monocots or diocots. So the monocots are like onions and the grasses, the grass family, the grains and everything. They just have one leaf come up and opens up, whereas the dicots, they come up and they open up with these two little seed leaves, which is what the plant was. The seed splits in two, and as it comes up, the radical goes down into the ground, the root, and the dicot comes up, and there's the two seed leaves. Well, we don't touch them at that stage. They're still really tender, and they need to grow on a little bit, and then you get the first true leaf of the plant comes up, and I normally leave it, depends on how big the plant's going to grow, but they're normally not much bigger than that. I normally wait until there's a real true leaf on there, and then what we do is we prick them out, put them into bigger pots, something perfect for Mossfield organic yogurt pots with holes put in the bottom, perfect size for them. Put them in there, kind of nurse them along a bit. They can, as they get older, they can get a bit hungry. They can be quite hungry for nutrients, but at that stage they're still kind of growing, you know. So what I intend to do, what we thought we would do is, because with so many seeds, is that we would we'd grow some plants for a plant sale, and that way you know, it saves some people who don't want to go through this whole process of growing them, and then the money could come into the seed bank, and that could pay for other things like pots and compost and whatever. So what we'll do is I'm going to put 2 seeds in each one, and then once they've grown up, I can pull them apart and I can pot them up separately, and we'll have instead of 10 plants, we'll have 20 plants in each one.
Kevin, do they need it like just after they come through the soil to germinate? Why do you put them at the window? Because
light's a stimulant. See, one of the biggest problems is when say there's a roof there and there's light coming in there, they'll all bend to go towards the light, and that's why you have to pay attention to them. If you might have to keep turning them around or whatever, or they're in too much heat all of a sudden because they're getting leggy. They have just a really big thin stem, and that's not good for them. You're going to have to nurse them even more. You want them to be fairly stocky. So I'm constantly, every day I'd either water, or the thing about watering is you don't water unless you have to water, really. So you really need to test to see if it is moist enough, and then just give it a watering if it isn't moist enough, because you can drown them as well. And yeah, they normally germinate really fast. And so once I've got them up a bit, then I'll probably put them in the polytunnel, but I'll make sure that there's something underneath them to give them a bit of insulation underneath, because you know I have like tables made up like this, and so if they're sitting on that, they're getting cold underneath them as well, because you know the cold always sinks down to the ground. So just a piece of cardboard on top of it, or if you've got some polystyrene, or heaven forbid if you've got some polystyrene, put that underneath them just to give them that warmth. And then I use some of that just a piece of fleece, you know, the white fleece, and I'll take that off during the day, and then at night time I'll put that on and tuck it round them. And 3 years ago we had a severe frost one night, and I went out, and it was really strange. I took the cover off, and the frost had burnt the tops off of some but not off of the others, and I couldn't, there was no rhyme or reason in any of it why the frost took these ones out and it didn't take the other ones out. But by that stage they were kind of, you know, this biggish, and so it burnt the top leaves off of them. So all I did is I just pinched out those dead leaves at the top, and then they produced two other little shoots out of the sides of the leaves that go in, and I ended up with tomato plants with one stem at the bottom and two stems going up at the top. So you can do that if if you haven't got the room to plant loads of tomatoes. You can plant tomatoes in there and then just pinch them out when they're about that big, and they'll produce shoots out the side, and then you'll have two instead of one. And then you really have to look after them, because it needs to be nurtured and made sure that it grows properly. So with tomatoes, you have vine tomatoes and you have bush tomatoes. They're called indeterminate and determinate. So the indeterminate are the vines, the ones that grow up and we wind them around a piece of string, and the determinate ones are just small bush. They still need looking after, because they as we grew some in here called Mano last year from Hungary, you know, they get quite heavy and pull themselves down. So that's more a case of having some little sticks or something that you can keep the branches off the ground, so that they're not getting wet every time you water them or whatever. With the indeterminate ones, also what you're doing is as they're going up, they're making side shoots. Now, if you left the side shoots, and I did this when I was in California, because I just wanted to see, you know, what would it do if it was a crazy mess. They were everywhere kind of thing, you know, and then the tomatoes were all out there. So what you do is, it's a cultural thing where you just nip out these shoots at the sides. And then what they do is on the main stem, they'll throw out a fruiting stem. So you'll have leaves, and then you'll have a fruiting stem, and then that'll have the little yellow flowers on it, and then from that, then the tomatoes grow off of that. This year what we're going to grow for selling, unless anybody, I mean, we have a massive amount of seeds here. If anybody wants seeds, you have to share seeds or be a company, whatever. So it's best to share them out. It's a great thing to share out. And if the futures economists are right, we have a cold, hungry winter coming next winter. There's a lack of nitrogen for most of the farmers on the planet. So what we're eating this year came from the year before the war in Ukraine. So this winter coming up is going to be a hungry one, apparently. So it's a good time to start growing everything. So yeah, most of the ones, or all of the ones I've selected. So if anybody thinks we should be growing anything else, that's great. We get them, would grow some more. They're all cherry type tomatoes, and the reason for that is they're much more productive. than the big salad tomatoes or the bigger ones which you use for stuffing or for making sauces and things out of them. So and also we're after the sugar. That's the real thing. We're after the sweetness in the little cherry tomatoes. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing with those. The peppers, they're the same kind of thing, but you know, we have when we come to peppers, we have sweet peppers and chili peppers, and then there's breakdowns in between those two types as well, with like cayenne peppers and ones for making stuffing. Ones like padron peppers, where you kind of fry it in some salt in a skillet, and 1 in 10 is really hot. In California, that's what you eat when you sit around having a few beers in the sunshine and the blue skies. You cook some padron peppers, and everybody sits around, and then all of a sudden, woohoo! Somebody will take off because they'll get the hot one. Right? But apparently, it's been proven scientifically that capsicum, that heat that's in the hot peppers, is really good for us as humans to have that in our diet regularly. I think it. I don't know what the reason is, but we were kind of talking. Sorry.
It's anti-inflammatory. Oh yeah, arthritis.
Yeah, for lots of things. I think what it does is like it stimulates the body because it's kind of it's hot and spicy. But it's something that I've found mainly in Ireland. I think it's getting better now, but mainly in Ireland, people didn't like spicy food. But there's difference from the spicy food of the curry sauce from the chipper and some of these peppers. That's the thing. Yeah. When you start going into the peppers, they get ridiculous though. They have this Scoville rating, which tells you how hot they are, which is done on proportion. So if you have a Scoville value of 2,000, it means it's 2,000 times hotter than 1 drop of the heat. So the more the Scoville goes up, the hotter it goes up. So there's a lot of people who are. It's addictive substance as well. Apparently, it's banned in prisons in Mexico. The hot chili peppers, because you can get some kind of buzz out of it, I suppose. I just turn into a pool of sweat on the floor if it was me. But then when you find out that these ones like the something devil and they've got all these names now, they were originally used in India, a lot of them, for taking barnacles off the bottoms of boats and things like that. They were actually the Carolina Reaper. That's one of the famous ones. Yeah, if you go on YouTube, there's thousands of idiots eating them, and being filmed screaming and then tipping milk down them to try and get rid of it. That's another thing. If you do have a hot one, don't try and get rid of it with water. It won't work. It'll just make it worse. You need something with a fat in it, so like milk with butter in it. So that's kind of, when you look at the tomatoes that are also in the Zapotec peoples in the Americas, they have some crazy looking tomatoes. They have one which is like it's about that big, and it's made up of loads of little smaller tomatoes, and they would take that when they were traveling and just pull off a tomato, a piece of it every now and then, and eat it as they were going along. So there's still lots of diversity there, but as agriculture and seed production gets streamlined and bred down, a lot of these varieties start to disappear because everybody is growing the latest F1, which the one that plagued us for years was sun golds. Everybody was growing sun golds, and it's something about the translocation of sugars. It translocates sugars to the fruit, so they're very sweet, but they're F1 hybrids. And now there's several people around the planet dehybridizing them to create open pollinated variety. Does everybody know the difference between a hybrid and an open pollinated plant?
No.
No, right. So an open pollinated plant is a plant that just receives its pollen through the wind, through insect activity or whatever, from one plant to another. When you have a hybrid, And what they do is they take different characteristics that they want to create into a tomato, and they create at least two inbred lines. So they keep inbreeding them and inbreeding them and inbreeding them. So basically they make them more and more homogeneous. There's not a huge amount of diversity in the genetics. And then what they do is they bang them together, they cross them together, and this creates an F1 hybrid. And in the F1 hybrids, they're all fairly almost the same. And
they can't pollinate, is that it?
Sorry?
They can't pollinate.
They can pollinate. So the thing is, if you were to save seeds of an F1 hybrid, it would be called an F2.
Yeah.
And then what happens is there's actually a Gregor Mendel found out about this whole thing years before the rest of science caught up, maybe 100 years later. But what it is, there's a mathematical proportion to things. So if we take an F1 hybrid and we save the F2 generation and we grow out a population of that, there'll be a proportion that is the same as the parents. Yeah. So then if we take those and save seed of those, the next year the proportion will get bigger. And so they reckon after 7 generations you can lock it. It's almost, it's coming true to type.
Yeah. It's like dog breeding, I think.
Also, it's all genetics is based basically on this.
Giving a true characteristic.
Yeah. But see, the thing is, in horticulture and agriculture, there's more going on than that, because when you look at the amount of labour that needs to go into creating these hybrids, what they normally do is, I know is a guy in Leash was growing broccoli, I think it was, and it was originally created in Japan, and then for Japan they go to Central America where they can get labour dirt cheap. And that's when they start the actual hybridization of it. What we can do is we can use the two halves of the world to speed things up. So we can grow it up here, save the seeds of it, send it down to New Zealand or Australia, because when it's winter here, it'll be summer there. They'll grow it, they send it back to us, so you can speed it up. And in fact, it does say something in the Bible about 7 generations. It's very... It's not new knowledge kind of thing. But most growers that I know are either too busy to be involved in seed saving, or they've been told that this is a really hard job and you need professional people to do it. It's not true like that at all. And what's happening now is we're going more and more from this homogenization, which is under the EU law, which each variety has to be distinct, uniform and stable, which makes it homogeneous. It's genetics, it gets less and less genetics, and then sets it up for a fall with unknown diseases or climate change or whatever. Whereas when you allow the pollen to flow, you get what's known as heterozygous populations, where they're all slightly different, but it's all food. And as long as you're not going too far back into the wild and introducing wild genetics into it, they should have something that's good for us to eat. And I was just listening to this guy who was on about it. He says, okay, I grow squashes. One year they taste like this. Next year they're a bit different. I just adapt them into something else into the cooking. My cooking changes. We've become like, I have to have a cauliflower like this every Wednesday to make cauliflower souffle or whatever it is we want. We have to remember this is food. We've concentrated too much or we've been taken down this line that with varieties and seeds, that varieties and reliability and all of this. But what it's done is it's made us unable to produce our own seed. So there's now 4 mega corporations in the world who own about 80% of the seed in the world. That's what they are, the corporations. But the thing is, okay, a lot of this is agriculture rather than horticulture, but it comes into horticulture as well. And as we're a part of the EU, there's certain laws as well that they're just starting to break out of this homogeneous, everything having to be the same all the time, and starting to look at the fact that, oh my God, we've not got enough genetics in our food crops. And so now they're allowing these heterozygous populations to actually be created and to be sold as seeds by organic growers. And this is the beginning, and it's taking off everywhere, and it's producing loads of new food, and a lot of people talking about, like, this is how it was meant to be. Nature does the work. Like, we just select what it is that we want out of it, and we can save the seeds from those. So it's probably never been like this before, going, well, maybe hundreds of years ago, but they then didn't have the information that we have now. It was just information that was passed down mainly from generation to generation on how to grow good seed.
So hybrids aren't necessarily better for you. It's more that you can choose.
Yeah, I think what happens with hybrids is because you inbreed them, so you get a thing called hybrid vigor, which means they grow bigger and stronger and whatever. But I think what it is a loss of genetics between these two inbred lines, that when you put them together, see, to be a hybrid, it only has to be better than the parents. And so what you do is you put these two bits together, and you bring characteristics from this one and characteristics from this one that weren't in the parents. And so you get this vigor that happens with hybrids. But it does leave it in the hands of corporations, and it's far too dangerous to leave it in the hands of corporations. Nowadays we're doing things like hybrid swarms, especially if we can get hold of old hybrids, because the first hybrids that came out, there was a lot of genetic information in them. So what you do is, you just say we're doing a bean, you just get as many different hybrids as possible, put them all together, and you create a hybrid swarm. And then in the next generations, you start to develop varieties or selections from that hybrid swarm. So after doing seed saving for over 20 years, this is the first time it's kind of found that it's kind of radicalized, and there's people all over the planet now. And it all started because the seed companies had become so uniform that they couldn't provide seeds for people who weren't in the best places. So if you're living in a valley in the States somewhere where there's, like Colorado or somewhere where there's big mountains and there's snow on those mountains 9 months of the year, that cold is coming down into your valley all the time. And even Scotland is having problems because they don't have a seed company in Scotland. So they're getting their seeds from like Kings and Moles and people who are in East Anglia, which is like the bump that sticks out in the North Sea, and it gets long warm summers, so they don't get that in Scotland. And that's one of the things, if you're importing seeds from somewhere, it can take a few years for them to get adapted to being in Ireland, because they want to grow, all they're thinking about is growing seeds to sell.
Yeah.
And so what they want is the plants to grow, and then for the seed to ripen over the time that they're in. So there used to be a lot grown in North Africa. And also when I was down in New Zealand, in the Wairarapa, there was loads of seed companies down there as well. But we don't have that luxury. Our late summers can be really kind of a bit misty and damp, and we get all these molds and things come through. And so we can, one of the hardest things I've heard for us to grow is basil. It just kind of goes moldy at the time when it's creating seeds. So I mean, that's another thing that we're doing. By keep on growing these varieties here and saving the seeds, we're selecting seeds for growing here. And that's one of the things that Brown Envelope Seeds down in Skibbereen uses as a selling point, is if we can grow seeds here, they'll grow anywhere in the British Isles. So if we can grow seeds here, they'll probably grow, well, they'll grow in Dublin anyway. Yeah, they'll grow on the East Coast. So, okay, right. I think that's about that. Oh yeah, and then we're going to be doing some lettuces. So when I had the heart attack, I thought, I ain't going to be able to do that farming business any longer. That's just too physical. But I know I'm obsessed with this, so I was kind of like, right, I'm going to get something to keep me occupied. So I was at that stage. I was getting into this whole thing on about nutrients, phytonutrients, and everything. And I knew this guy from Wild Garden Seeds up in Oregon, Frank Morton. He's a big lettuce breeder and everything. So I just bought a whole load of lettuce varieties off of Frank Morton, and that you can't get in Ireland. With mainly the ones with deep red colours in them, because lettuces are inbreeders. So I don't need populations of 200 plants to cross-pollinate each other. The lettuces actually pollinate themselves. So they reckon evolutionary that these plants were on the outside of these big cross-pollinators, and they didn't get as many pollinating insects. So they developed techniques for self-pollinating themselves. So, excuse me, if I take a variety, so this guy Frank Morton had this this variety that's called Camo Oak Heart. So it's an oak leaf lettuce, and it's camouflage color. It's kind of different greens, dark greens and light greens. And they're really pretty on the plate in a salad. So what I did out of that is there was a Frank is fairly clever. He never totally hybridizes everything he's got. He might take things up to like the 5th generation, and then he releases them and lets you get on, because there's going to be lots of diversity there. So I had this red camo oak heart lettuce grew up at the house. So I saved seeds in that, and then we sowed some plants down here, and then we saved seeds off of that. So that's one of the varieties of lettuce we're going to grow. And the idea of a lot of what we're growing now is that the farm is able to grow the big populations, the brassicas, the umbellifers, you know, the carrots and the parsnips, parsley, things where you need big amounts of these plants, because they're mainly, they have perfect flowers, these plants. So they have male and female parts in their flowers, but they have a self-sterility, so they can't pollinate themselves. And so that's where you need the bees to go from one to the other to take the pollen around, to keep that population of genetics alive in them. So the farm can do that, and we'll receive seeds from the farm into the community gene bank. But we can do things, because of the small amount that we've got here, we can do things like peas and lettuces, and we can create seed from that then the farm can use as well. So we can have this relationship with the farm where we don't have to grow the big ones. So onions is another thing. I mean, the onions from the farm now are excellent. It's been about 8 years since we started crossing into them, and it came about because of Bear barley. There's this barley called Bear barley, and it's mainly from the Orkneys and the Shetlands. It was over here as well once upon a time, and it came with the Neolithic farmers. So it's been here since the Neolithic farmers came here, thousands of years. And it's a landrace variety. So a landrace is, if you look at all this barley, is slightly different. There's slightly different bits in it. So that's the way you kind of hedge your bets to anything happening. So that's why I thought, oh, wonder if we can make a landrace onion. So we started then crossing, because we were saving our own seeds for the onions. So all that meant what we would do is we would grow other onions alongside the clock onion. And then if we thought that anything was any good, we'd save bulbs from that, like we do of the clock onion, and we would put them in the same polytunnel. And then the bees would cross, because they're bee pollinated, and we'd pick up the genetics from all of them. So we've got lots of genetic difference within the onions, but they're absolutely incredible this year. Even now, some of them are like this big, you know. So it goes on, and now there's 3 or 4 populations of the clock onion around the country, with different people adding different things to it. So keeps going. Any questions?
Just the watering, sorry,
Yeah.
of the seeds. Do you water them from underneath or on top? When you know, say after planting them. So when you plant
Yeah,
them,
yeah, I
you just
do.
wet the compost and.
Yeah, that's a good question, really. It all depends on how fast the germination is. We'd always have problems with onions and parsley. because they're slow. They'd be slow germinating. Mainly the onions problem is because we're doing them this time of the year, and it would be cool. And if you keep watering them from the top, then you start to get that green growing on the top, you know. And what that can do then, it kind of seals off the top of the cell, and even if the seed is germinating, it can't get through it. So it is a good idea to have the trays where you can just settle them in that. And we have one up there. It's a big long black tray, and you just put these trays in it and water it. Give them half an hour, take them out, put another load in, kind of thing. Yeah.
From underneath.
From underneath, yeah.
But when you put them in first, you water them from it.
I do, yeah, because the compost will be loose, and when you try and move it, and shouldn't believe it, a whole lot falls out. And that's happened more than once. Or what we would do is we would carry these trays like that, and everything would fall out. So then the compost.
Sorry, Karen, I have a question about the timing for us. So it's for the Solanaceae family. Would you sow the tomatoes and peppers, aubergines and chilies and all these crops at the same time? Or would you wait a little bit for the peppers? Because I read somewhere that they go a little bit later, but I'm not sure why.
Yeah, not by much though.
Okay.
More to give myself a break. You know, I'm doing the tomatoes. Oh my God, I don't have time to do the peppers, kind of thing. Again, because you're not going to probably keep them in the tunnel.
Oh, no.
You're going to put them up somewhere where it's warm, kind of thing. Yeah, that's the only reason, really. Yeah. It's just that we'll run out of time otherwise. The winter the autumn starts to come in, and they're all they all like the heat. They're heat-loving plants. Yeah. So these are the trays that we mainly use. We got these because Philip Draper, who's an organic grower out near Burr, he would get plants coming from Holland. So he doesn't grow any of his own seeds. He would get loads of these come out from Holland with little lettuces or cabbages in them, and then he'd sell these off at €1 each. So this is why we ended up with these, and we call these 150s. I don't know what the dimension is in there. They're really good for growing things like lettuce, spinach. You start the tomatoes off in there as well. But then when we found that with the brassicas, we didn't want to start them in here and then have to take them to a different size tray. And if you put them out that big, it only needs one slug to take 2 or 3 bites out of it, and it's finished. So these are called 77s. You can get these from Fruit Hill Farm. And we'd put all of our brassicas in these, because then we'd end up with a bigger plant before we had to plant it out, which means it would survive better when we plant them out in the ground. So there's loads of different compost, but we get this. The day will come when we'll have to make our own compost, I should think. Again, as we did once upon a time. These come in from Germany, Klausmann, and again Fruit Hill Farms bring them in. Because they bring a lot of stuff in from Germany, because their organic sector in Germany is that far ahead of ours here, really. You know, as Bertie Ahern once said to me, it's just a fad. Little did we know that he was as well. So you can get different. Make sure you get the right compost, because this is what's it called? This one is peat free, and it says tray, peat free. So more and more now it's becoming peat free. So they're probably using composted waste, plant waste, and whatever. We've had several companies start up in Ireland selling compost, and they've never been able to keep the standard up. Organic, I'm on about. Or they've never been able to keep the standard up, because Klausmann they have a whole laboratory there and scientists, so you know they really know their stuff, kind of thing. It's a shame that we have to get it from Germany though.
But how much would one of those cost?
10.
€10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if for a garden, for starting off your own seedling, you probably only need one of those.
Yeah. That's okay. Yep.
Yeah, but then the potting compost is slightly different. It's chunkier.
Yeah.
And the nutrients are balanced more differently.
Yeah.
There. So you wouldn't use the potting compost in these trays.
Okay.
So look at it.
And you always keep the compost outside the polytunnel as well.
Yeah, because if it's the idea that if you're growing biologically or organic, everything's alive. You know, if you put this in a hot tunnel and you're not paying attention to it, and we get 40 odd degrees, you've just cooked all the biology in there. And also the cold as well. We would normally take them in and put them in a barn type area and just keep them, you know, be aware that it's a living thing. One of the other things is, like Tony said to me, oh, we need to clean all the... No, nature is dirty. You're not going to clean it. Those days have gone. In fact, they worked out, you know, when you used to have the apprenticeship thing in gardens, it was the apprentice's job to wash all of the pots and things, and they worked out that was just to keep him busy during the winter, really. You know, you can't clean nature. It's inherently dirty. You just make sure there's no snails in there. You know, because they do like to live in there. It's a lovely little place for them. So yeah, you can't get hung up on being dirty any longer. You can expect it.
It suits me very well.
So, yeah. So I'll talk a bit about the sewing book as well. You know, when I was in California, it was they really put it into you that you need to keep records. So this is the sewing book for, was that 2014 to 2018, I think it is here. So basically what you have is, you have the name, so that's the name of the variety that you're putting in and what it is. So onion, clock onion, whatever. And then the origin of the seed, which is the seed company you got it from, or whether you saved the seed yourself. And then the year of the seed, so what year was the seed gathered. And then the amount that was sowed. So say we sowed one tray, yeah, I would normally put 1 times 150 or 1 times 77, you know, so I would know. And then the amount of seeds per cell, because some seeds like onions, you never put 1 seed per cell in an onion, because the shape of the roots, they kind of go down. They're not like lettuce or brassica roots where they kind of go out and they fill the cell out. Because if you just put 1 in there and you've got your onion there and you try to transplant them, normally you kind of you can poke it from underneath and pull it out, all the compost falls off of it, and then you got the roots are bare. And it doesn't matter so much with leeks, they're a lot hardier, but onions, it kind of sets them back. So you put 4 or 5 onions in each one, and then when they've grown up enough, they've filled out the cell, so you can just, you know, just drop that like that and then just throw them to the person who's planting them as you're doing them, because they hold together. Yeah. So, and these are, what I normally have then is the other page is free, so I can make comments like, don't sow parsley this early next year. It's a waste of time, like, you know. Because that way you're going forwards, you're not making the same mistake. Because I mean, ye might all be able to do it, but my head can't retain what I was doing last week, never mind last year, kind of thing. You know, so you get an idea what really works, and also you get an idea what doesn't work, so then it makes you look then to find something that does work. Yep. So sewing book, always the sewing book. So this is a compost. This is the wow, that's really fine, isn't it?
Fine, is
It is, yeah. And sometimes, you know, like you were saying about the tops going green and whatever, you can get some sharp sand and mix into it. It always improves that. You got more aeration going into it. No, I just.
Do you want to travel?
No, I'll use this. Yeah, you need to make sure that there's no big lumps in it as well, because the last thing you want is some compost on the bottom and then an air gap and then some more compost, because as the roots go down, they'll just get air pruned when they go down into that. And that's the other idea of growing your plants on something like, a table of wire, because when the roots go out of the bottom of the tray or the pot, they get air pruned, sorry. And then what happens is further back on the root system, it will produce more roots, and so you get a thicker root system on it. Like that. Okay. One thing that I didn't do was bring markers. What I would normally do is I'd sit down with the book, I'd write out what it is that I'm going to sow for that day, and then I'd write all the labels, and I'd have all the labels ready so that I don't have to, I'd put this in, put the labels in, then I sow, then I water, it's done.
Can I get you some labels?
If you've got some, yeah. Or what I'll do with this is, in fact, I'll make a map.
Map?
Yeah, I'll make a map. If you give me one label, which will allow me to then know that this end here is this end here, yeah. I'll write then down, 2 rows coming from that label, and I'll know exactly what's in there. I mean, it's much easier when you're just doing a whole tray, something. But I doubt if any of us with a garden would be growing 150 of something. Too big. And like these trays and things, we throw away a lot of plastic containers. We could be using all of those things at least once or twice before we throw them away. So I kind of just put it in. Make sure there's none of those lumps. Oh, my gloves. Okay. And it'll always be the ones at the corners and the ones at the sides that sink the most. The ones in the middle are normally fuller kind of thing. And you have to be careful of that, because, if you're going to go to all the effort of doing this, you don't want to have to wait for another month or so and there's nothing growing at the side because you just didn't bother to make sure that there was enough soil in there or something, or a compost in there. So I normally do that like that, and then just chop it a couple of times like that, and then put some more in. So I don't want it too compacted, because you've got to remember you need air in the soil. Again, I don't want too much air in the soil either. I want enough in there so that the plant's going to get nutrition. So something like that. Okay, so now what we would do is, we don't have another full tray, but bits of trays, just as good. I've got it here. You just put that on top like that. Push. Okay. The worst thing you can do is to bury a seed too deep. It'll either take more time to come up or it won't come up at all. So the kind of rule of thumb is 2.5 times the thickness of the seed. So this pea is this thick, about that deep. The pea would go, yeah, something like that. So we're going to put in tomato seeds. So again, I hope most of you got this seed saving guide, because what this does, it gives you an idea of how many plants you need to plant to keep that genetic diversity going within the population of seed that you want to save. So tomatoes are all of these anyway. Some of the old ones, the brandywines and things like that, they have a much bigger flower that's open, and they will get cross-pollinated by bees. Whereas these are modern varieties, they won't get cross-pollinated. So they're basically inbreeders. So we don't have to worry about them being pollinated by other varieties. So we don't have to think about the size of the population too much. Although what they say, you still need to keep diversity even in self-seeders. So you normally grow 10 plus plants. So these are Brad's Atomic Grape. Substitute those for these. What I normally do is tip them into something when I'm sowing them. I don't like putting them on my hands. Maybe my hands are sweatier than other people's, but you've a lot of oil on your skin as well. So just one's 3 in there, never mind. 2. And I'd go all the way down there, do all of those, and then I would just take the compost, sprinkle it on the top, and then use a piece of cardboard. And I wouldn't go over it like that. I'd go over it diagonally like this, just to take the loose compost off. And it means I don't drag the seeds out of the cell as well. If I did it like straight like that or straight like that, I've more of a chance of dragging the seed out with the compost that I take away. So we go across like that. Or so Pat Malone told me. Yeah. So if you want to come and sow some seeds, I'll any questions?
You're putting one seed per cell, right? Or
I'm putting in 2. Yeah, because we're gonna divide them. So I could sow 2 trays, or I can sow 1 tray, and it's much easier to have 1 tray on my windowsill.
How long will they take to
Germinate.
germinate? Yeah.
Yeah, if they're warm enough, which is I find is normally like the warmth that we like. Most of the plants, they'll germinate within a week or so.
Okay, oh, that's pretty good.
Yeah. And that's another thing about self-sown seeds as well. I can tell you that in the seed industry there are different grades of seeds. So the best seed that's produced is called Prima seed, and that goes back into the company's own growing more plants to grow more seed kind of thing. And then there's a second grade of seeds that normally goes to farmers, and then a third grade of seeds that normally goes to gardeners. So we normally get kind of the lowest grade of seed that there is. And like that was the first thing that struck me when we started saving our own seed, was the speed of germination and the growth of the plants is much different from the seed we were buying. And that was even, we were buying Bingenheimer, so we were buying biodynamic seed from Germany, from Bingenheimer. Yeah. So that's the best, some of the best seed you can buy. Yeah.
So when does when these germinate, then
Yeah.
um, we just keep watering them from underneath.
Yeah.
Until they grow what high?
Until the second true leaf, normally.
And when would that happen?
When is your second true leaf
I
going
know.
to come up?
About what time?
I don't know. Some of these things.
I know you're talking about. A week or
No. Normally over a week, just over a week. Well, it all depends.
just over a week.
Yeah,
Wow.
2 weeks. About 2 weeks, and you could get some erratic. Some can grow and some don't germinate at the same time. In the seed breeding thing, you're looking for the first seeds to come up. So, like, if I'm growing lettuce, and I've got a whole tray of lettuce, the first seeds that come up, I mark each of those seeds, and they're the ones that I save seed from, and then I eat the rest of them. It's another genetic characteristic that speed the germination.
So the better, the quicker they come up, the
That's
better.
all we need. It's 20 of them.
Okay.
Yeah, and also another thing is it's normally like the bigger the seed, because the bigger the size of the seed, the more absorption. They imbibe the water, which makes germination. So the bigger the seed, with the more carbon that there is in it, the more water it sucks up and it germinates faster.
So what will I put on this? Just tomato or Brad's Atomic, yeah?
Yeah, or you could just put one,
How do you mean one? Yeah?
and then we'll just put Brad's Atomic as number 1.
Oh, I see that. Very good, very good.
So
Because trying to write all that down on the thing. So
So-
put those back in there.
yeah, but take that compost.
I will, I know.
So the lettuce, they don't normally germinate over 18 degrees. It's a big problem in summer for a lot of growers if it gets too hot, to get their seeds. Again, it's the germination. Once they've germinated, they're grand, they're off. And so I know guys who grow them in, there's polystyrene fish boxes, and they put them inside somewhere that's cool. What I normally do if I'm sowing seeds, if it's hot, I put them in the fridge the night before, and then the next day I'd sow in the morning when it's cool, and so then they'll germinate. They germinate better. But in the summers now, it's getting that it's easy to be over 18 degrees.
Yeah.
So,
And do you think are the lettuces better outside
oh
to
yeah.
grow them on outside?
Oh yeah. The texture, the cells, and everything seems to be much better outside. They seem a bit more robust, kind of thing, And when you start tunneling down into lettuces, you've got Kos lettuces and icebergs and what the flannelly what type ones, butterheads and different ones there. You then start looking that they've really gone into lettuces in a load of different ways. So lettuces that are frilly around the edges, they're specifically made so when they sit in the salad, they don't all kind of flop like a butterhead would and kind of stick together. They kind of loft themselves up from the other ones. And then ones with these little, they have like these little dimples in them. That's for holding the, the salad dressing.
Oh.
When you dress the salad, it sits in all these little bits there, and that was my main thing in California was salads. Looking at salads because they're the ones who created these mescaline mixes and all of these things like that, and it really a salad is a kind of mixture of a visual thing that you're looking at, which entices you to eat the thing, and then those different crunches and textures and flavors that you get when you eat it. So it's never one species really. It's a mixture of different species, and some of the different things that we use are these mustard greens. You normally take them when they're little because when they get bigger they can get a bit spicy, but if you have them like all mixed into a salad, it's not as powerful when you're eating it. You're getting the flavor of that's why I love romans. I love Kos lettuces because they have these sweet crisp ribs on them and they've got this big crunch thing going on, but then when you mix it with some rocket and some these different types of mustards, you get a much more interesting thing to eat than just butterhead lettuce. I think. And I'm not putting down butterhead lettuces because there's some nice butterhead lettuces as well. They have one. We used to grow one on the farm called Loose End, and it was an incredible plant. Yeah. So we'll do. We're gonna. That's kind of the blurb over with. How are you doing? We'll sow some of these in a minute, but shall we just have a look at these salads here? So, for you who haven't seen the beans, like. So this one here is the Osaka giant purple mustard, and it's really at a juvenile stage at the moment. The leaves can get to be about this big on them, big leaves like this, and as they get bigger, they get spicier. But it's funny because they're brassicas as well, but kind of this side of the Himalayas, we tended to concentrate on the kales and the cabbages, and then we developed all of the other brassicas out of that. On the other side of the Himalayas, they seem to concentrate more on the mustard families, and so the Osaka purple mustard, when it goes to seed, it'll be about this high. It's a massive great plant when it goes to seed. I'll pass it around. Does anybody want to try it? Help yourself. What we're going to do with these, they're too closely planted for seeds. So what we'll do is, we can dig some up and take them home to your garden or whatever, or just try them. I mean, last year we spent a lot of time on producing seeds, and we didn't really get to eat much. So I was thinking this year we'll be growing things so that we can try things as well, because that's one of the things. It's no use putting all your time and effort into growing some seeds, and then you don't like it at the end of it. It's much better to try something first. So these ones are the Osaka giant purple. This is Ruby Streaks. It's a cut leaf mustard. This one here, and then this over here is Komatsuna. This one here, they tend to have a little bit of a cabbage flavour at times, but again, when that's chopped into a salad, you don't really know. And they would use a lot of these things, in stir fries.
Okay.
So
Is it a mustard as well?
they're all mustard family.
Yeah.
They are, yeah.
Take a few there.
Yeah, try some.
No, we have that.
See if you haven't tried it before, try it.
Some of the leaves.
You can always spit it out.
Some of the leaves here are round, some are spiky. Is that two varieties?
Yeah, that's Mizuno there, the spiky one.
Right.
And that's Komatsuna here.
Yeah.
There's another one that I brought back from California called the giant southern curled mustard. And that's a beast as well. It roamed freely at the bottom of one of the fields down on the farm for about 4 years. So it would seed itself every year and come up. Basic species.